Hi, folks. Welcome to the webinar. My name is Sean McGrath. I am the CEO of Entrepreneurial Scotland. For those of you who have met me before and know me, you'll identify that I am, in fact, an Irishman sitting talking to you today on St. Patrick's Day. I can confirm I am stone cold sober and intend to be so for the next 60 minutes at least, after which I can make absolutely no promises at all. So I won't delay you too much, mostly in an effort to try and get myself out to the pub later this evening. I wanted to start by saying welcome, and please do feel free to turn your cameras on. This is an interactive session later on, but I am under orders to let you know that the session is being recorded. So if you do turn your cameras on, it will be recorded as well. But look, thank you very much. I'm delighted to welcome you guys to the session. Just before we introduce the stars of the show, which is very much not me, I wanted to steal a couple of minutes of your time to set the scene and introduce Entrepreneurial Scotland and the exchange program that we run. So the whole idea behind Entrepreneurial Scotland is a really simple one. It's that an entrepreneurial Scotland is a prosperous Scotland, and that prosperity is created by one group in society, and that is the people who can think and act and lead in an entrepreneurial way. And for us, the definition of an entrepreneur is someone who recognizes a good idea and then executes on it. They are people who get stuff done. And the one thing we are always fond of telling people is that entrepreneurship is not a solo pursuit. It is actually a team sport. And so for that, we want to try and help people understand that you don't need to go about this by yourself. It's important that you build a team around you that will help you to do the things that you need to do. And that's why today's webinar is so important and so linked to what we do, because what we are going to hear from later on is two athletes that have had incredible careers and who have done amazing things. And on the front of it may look like it is a solo pursuit, but in reality, there is a huge amount of team effort that goes into making that happen. And for me, that's so relatable to the work that we do with people who lead businesses, because every day you sit in a very lonely position. You sit at the top of an organization making all the decisions, and it can feel very isolated. But the reality is that it's a team that drives you forward. So the theme of this webinar today is who you run with matters, and that's why it is so important for us to reach out and try and help people like yourselves understand the importance of building these connections and building these relationships and not having to do it alone. So just before we turn over to the guys, the program that Entrepreneurial Scotland runs that helps with this is called the Exchange. And in its very simplest format, and there are several members on the call today who will probably speak to you guys later. In its simplest format, what it is about bringing people who are leading in business together and creating peer groups, creating connections that allow you to meet people who are on the same page as you and who are in the same position as you, and that commonality of leading and making these decisions in isolation. And it helps you to build a group of people around you that understand the challenges you face and can help you with that. And then we also surround you with a network, a community of people who are a few steps ahead of you and sometimes a few steps behind you, who can help you on that journey as well. Because leaders learn from leaders, and building relationships, building connections is what will help you to succeed as you go forward. So if that is something that you're interested in, if you are someone who is operating an organization and leading, and you would like to have a community around you that can help you to do that and help you grow as a person and learn how to do it better, then the Exchange is always here to help you, and we'll do our very best. Great. So with that out of the way, I just wanted to cover off a couple of things quickly. So we will jump in a second into a conversation which will be ably led by Mark, who is not just an incredible athlete and represents a great aspect of Scottish sport, but is also the patron of Entrepreneurial Scotland. But once we do that, we will then follow on with a quick Q&A session as well. So at the end of this, there will be an opportunity to ask questions. There is a Q&A function at the top of the bar, so please do use that as we go along to type in questions, and I'll try and host as best I can at the end. After which we will then jump into breakout rooms. So in the breakout rooms, you guys will actually have an opportunity to connect with each other in smaller groups, and we will have someone who will facilitate that conversation for you. So that's the format of what we're going to cover off today, and I hope you guys will enjoy. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Mark Beaumont, who will introduce you to our main guest as well. And Mark, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you for the 50 plus folk that have made the time to join this afternoon. And I know lots of people are going to watch this back in the future. So again, if you're already involved in Entrepreneurial Scotland, or you're interested to get involved personally or through your organisations in the future, then I hope that this is an interesting and engaging conversation. To give you a very brief story as to how I got involved, I was at university in Glasgow a long time ago. I was passionate about sport, but I had no road into being a professional athlete at that point. And it was very much the inspiration through a number of things at that point, and the opportunities that gave me the quiet confidence to step out from university, not become an accountant, nothing wrong with that, but to pedal around planet Earth and to start making films about ultra endurance. So in February 2005, Ellen MacArthur sailed around the world. Single, solo, non-stop, solo sailing around the planet. I'm not a sailor, but that was a sporting feat that transcended the sport that she was a part of, and it inspired me unbelievably so. And I was mid-university at the time. I was then given the opportunity through what is now Entrepreneurial Scotland to do an internship in Boston. Spent an amazing summer between my third and fourth year working over there. And it took me out of my peer group of a couple of hundred folks studying economics, thinking we're all going to work in as accountants, to realizing there was, hundreds of thousands of options in life, not just one or two. And those two things, I would say, Ellen MacArthur sailing around the planet and having that opportunity with what is now Entrepreneurial Scotland, changed my mindset around what life could be. And I just wanted to mention that before bringing Eilish into the call, because I've been a long-standing supporter of everything that Sean and the team does. I think it's incredible how they support not just young people to build beyond school and then university, but the quiet confidence to actually make your own choices, to feel you're in the driving seat for what you do in your life, that sort of be valued for who you are rather than just what you do. And then what they do with the exchange now, supporting people, really pushing Scottish businesses and talent is extraordinary. So I know that's why we're all here, but I thought it was worth pausing on that point and explaining why I'm passionate to support what they do. Eilish, I'm going to bring you into the conversation pretty quickly, because having done a gazillion events like you, there's nothing worse than people try and tell your story for you. But all I'll say is that I think most people in the audience know who you are, have watched you on the global stage, do what you do. As depending which newspaper you read, one of Britain or Scotland's greatest distance runners, 4 Olympic Games under your belt, an incredible career of championships performances as well. Born and brought up in Dundee, just like myself, epicenter of the planet. And the other thing in common is that I was supported by my mum in my career for a very, very long time. I always called her base camp, and you've got that incredible sort of continuity in terms of that family legacy that you're a part of as well. So before we get into the team and the process and what we're here to talk about today, I'd love for you to reflect, first of all, on that introduction, how you see you rather than how the world sees you.
Yeah, so hi everyone, thanks for having me. To be honest, you pretty much summed it up. I never got into the sport dreaming of becoming an elite athlete. I never ever really thought it was a viable job option for me, because growing up, I suppose I didn't really understand that even running was a job. I had no clue that my mum and dad were both professional athletes. Certainly at a very young age, I was super naive as to what that meant. It probably wasn't until I got to about high school that I realised that going out for a run every day is not normal. Not everyone's mum and dads go out the door at whatever time in the morning for a training run. So it was probably around high school that I started to have an appreciation of what elite sport was, rather than it being just a hobby. But yeah, it's been a sort of whirlwind couple of years from 2011. That was my first ever championship, the Olympic Games. I was thrown in right at the deep end as a 21-year-old. I wasn't someone that was making like loads of junior GB teams or having these like huge ambitions of going to the Olympic Games. Like, honestly, I never thought I was good enough. I never felt like I had the confidence, or I didn't feel like I would ever, perhaps maybe not live up to my parents, you know, the level that they were competing at. I just never thought I was capable of doing something like that. So it happened very quickly for me. Similar to yourself, I was at university, Dundee Uni. I was studying maths and accountancy as well. And I sort of just had this epiphany that it was either now or never. And I remember it was literally 2011, so the year before the Olympic Games in London, and I just completely transformed the way I was living. I stopped going out partying with all my friends and being a typical student, and just started living the way I thought a professional athlete should live. And within the year, I'd qualified for the Olympic Games. So I'd gone from a sort of Scottish university level to all of a sudden being thrown into the Olympics. It was such a huge turnaround for me. And from then, I haven't looked back. Since 2011 now, this has been the career path that I'm on. And I always promised my parents I'd go back and finish. I had one more year to do my honours. And yeah, we're now in 2026 and I still haven't gone back to do it just yet. But yeah, that's the pathway that I've ended up on.
That quiet confidence to sort of change how you see yourself, and therefore the world changes how they see you, is a sort of fascinating theme, whether you're an athlete or an entrepreneur. And it's the quiet confidence to sort of put yourself in the ring and try these things. So I'm really interested in that sort of younger you, especially because that first Games, of course, in 2012 was a home Games in London. There was so much hype around it. You know, you were incredibly young at university at the time, we're just coming out of. It's a huge amount of pressure. I'm really interested in the sort of the routines, the life you were leading then versus 2026. You know, I'm sure you were doing it as professionally as you could at the time, but you probably look back now and think, well, that's kindergarten compared to what I know now. So that sort of continuity in life, you're always doing your best, you're always working hard, but actually the routines and the process change because you frankly know more. You've got more around you. How would you reflect back to your sort of 21-year-old self?
Yeah, massively. I mean, I think you've nailed it really. I came at it from a very amateur level. You know, it was, for me, running was just a hobby because I was very focused on, my studies and just getting a good job out of university. That was really my number one focus because I didn't believe I was good enough to ever have a career in the sport. So it was always secondary. So although I worked hard, like there's no doubt about it, everyone in my club would always say that I was an absolute workhorse. You know, I would train so hard in training, but all the other stuff around it was just nonsense. Like I wasn't sleeping properly. I wasn't eating properly. I was just eating kebabs that my pals were coming in. You know, I was coming in at 3 a.m. in the morning and thinking that was totally fine then to go training at 9 a.m. in the morning, turning up hungover. And it was just the things around working hard were just not in place. And I think that's just the naivety of being a kid as well. You know, you're just young and you do recover faster, so you can get away with it. I wasn't getting injured. I wasn't getting tired. You know, it was because you're so young, your body's just so volatile. You can just throw loads of work at it and you can still get away with it. But it wasn't until I probably went to that Olympic Games and then I started getting the chance to go on like Olympic camps, you know, alongside it was like Helen Clitheroe and Jenny Meadows and just all these incredible women that I'd watched on the TV. And now all of a sudden, here I was getting to train alongside them. Hannah England was another one, world silver medalist in Daegu. And I remember just thinking, oh man, like these people are training. It wasn't so much the hard training, but it was everything around it. Like their recovery was just on point. They were getting massages, you know, like I've never even thought about that. Like, why would I need a recovery massage in my legs? You know, I just train, work hard and get on with it. But these people were in bed at 9 p.m. every night. You know, they were eating, I don't think I'd ever eaten a vegetable at that point. I was just eating off microwave pasta, microwave rice, just typical student beans on toast. And you know, it wasn't until I went on these camps that I was like, no, these people are elite. Like they have an elite mindset. Every single thing, every decision that they make throughout the day is purely around their sport, you know, and how to operate and how to function and how to like push themselves to that next level. So it was a very, very steep learning curve for me. And I think I didn't change overnight, but I think over the years, that's just developed and developed and developed. And now, I mean, to be in the sport now at the age I am, I'm actually like technically a vet 35 master now, but people always ask me like, how do I have that longevity? And I do think it's because I probably wasn't 100% nailed in, dialed in, focused in from a very, very young age. You know, I definitely over the years have gradually got more and more and more professional in how I've acted. And now when I look back, even looking back, 10 years, I think, what was I doing? Like, how was I even operating the way I was to what I am now? Like, I wish I could go back and tell my younger self, like, this is what you need to do. This is the type of training you need to do. It's also not about training at 100% all the time. That was another problem I would always have. I would push too hard. You know, I would train too hard and then I would get sick or I'd get injured. And now it's like you train hard, but you train smart. Like there has to be a really good balance of recovery within your program and within your schedule. So that's another reason I actually started my own not-for-profit within Scotland to support young female athletes, because I want to give back some of that knowledge and advice so that people don't make, like young women don't make the same mistakes I did, and can maybe be a little bit more into that professional mindset from not a super young age, but certainly when you're in your mid 20s. Like you really need to be capitalizing on that. Those are like your peak years in this sport, and also to instill that little bit of confidence too. I wish I had the confidence that I have now in not just my sport, but even in my own body and in, as my own person. I wish I had that growing up. I think I always had my mom and dad telling me I was good, but your parents are always going to tell you you're good. You know, they're going to tell you they love you and that you think you're great. But having that sort of external reassurance from somebody, I think makes a big difference. And that's what I sort of hope that I can instill in some of the young females that we help now.
Well, it's very hard to be what you can't see, and I would encourage everyone on this call to go back and read some of your recent LinkedIn posts, how you talk, you know, so calmly and sensibly about your job, both in terms of how you show up and look after yourself mentally and physically, how you deal with the world's eyes being on you. And, you know, we don't have time to cover all of that on this call, but, you know, I applaud the calm way that you just are consistent around what you do, and that you give young athletes, especially young female athletes, the quiet confidence to really think about these things as well. Physical health, mental health, you know, having a healthy relationship with that outside world, you know, having family at the heart of what you do, if you're lucky enough to have a loving sporting family like that. So we don't have a lot of time on this call to explore that, but I would encourage everyone to read some of your posts on that. You've touched on, Eilish, some of the people around you, and I'm really interested in the process as opposed to, you know, the results. Everyone looks at you and looks at me, and it's all about, you know, the Guinness World Records, the Olympics, the results, and you know they mean a lot. Of course they do, and that's what you strive for. But the life you actually live is the process, and I'm always encouraging people to really understand what it takes as opposed to the results you aspire to. And actually, when you get those results, how you then feel about them, how you then sort of, you know, collect yourself and find meaning in going again. And if you live your life in 4-year cycles, that's incredible endurance. So yeah, can you bring us behind the scenes? Maybe give us a real life example from the last year, which helps us understand the process, the habits, the routines, the team around you, as opposed to the bits we see on the telly.
Yeah, I'd say obviously being a professional athlete is a big commitment, because you're away from family and friends for probably, particularly being an endurance athlete. Like for me to compete with the best in the world, you'd be stretched to find anyone who competes, say, top 20 in the world, maybe even lower down than that, that isn't born or living at altitude. That's just the reality of endurance running, distance running. All of the top athletes are born either Kenya or Ethiopia. They really are the sort of mecca of the running world. And so it's how do you commit yourself to, obviously being born in Dundee, not quite got the same altitude location as them, but I try and base myself at altitude for a majority of the year, or certainly in better weather conditions, to try and get that higher quality, so stress on the body in some way or form. So for me, it's like 11, probably 11 months of the year I'm abroad, like away from family and friends. So it's a big commitment from my side, but to be honest, I often think it's an even bigger commitment from my partner as well, because he's committed to being away with me and travel with me, and he's away from his family and his friends. Like, I'm obviously searching, striving for greatness within my sport, but the thought that someone else is willing to do that for me for a combined goal, it still blows my mind that I've managed to find someone that's almost willing to sacrifice, I'm not, do you know what I mean, their own life and their own commitments and follow my dream. Like, it's just incredible to have that sort of support behind you. So I think it makes a big difference when I'm standing on the start line, or when I am going like through hard moments in training, or you are having to deal with a lot of external negativity from online comments online. I just always go back to like, well, I'm doing this for us. Like, it is a team effort. Like, I'm standing on the start line, I'm trying to be the best that I possibly can and be the best person that I can be as well, for him, for my partner, for my family, for our future family, for my mum and dad, who I know have put in hours and hours and endless hours driving from the top to the bottom of Scotland to get me to the Irvine cross country, to the Falkirk championships on the weekend. Like, it's all of those people behind the scenes from a very, very young age who have been there for me, obviously my mum and dad particularly, but now it's a huge, huge commitment for Michael to be with me every day. I mean, whether it's snow, wind, hail, torrential rain, I mean, he's out on the bike with me every day as well. So he's out on the bike pacing me, passing me drinks on runs. Like, it's having that commitment of someone to be there 24/7 is a huge commitment. Because as I said, it's 11 months of the year that we are ultimately in each other's pockets and just traveling from place to place to place. So it's incredible. We get to visit loads of amazing places, but at the same time, the realities are we are living out of 2 suitcases. You know, it's not a normal, or what I would class as a normal life, a normal way of living. But we try to make that as normal as we possibly can. And that's our normality for since pandemic, to be honest. That's really when we both committed to, right, let's do this. Let's just get a suitcase and go wherever the best locations are for you training, to try and get the absolute utmost out of the remaining years of your career. Because sport is like elite sport particularly is, I'm not going to be 50, 60, 70 and still competing in athletics. You know, it is a very short career that we have. So it's almost like the two of us have just agreed that we're going to commit for these next 5 years, maybe right up until LA. And then after that, then that's when we go back to living a normal life. We'll probably settle down in Scotland somewhere and then live out the rest of our days. But for now, it's like that commitment of going around place to place with 2 suitcases and just trying our best to put sport at the very top for what will be just a short number of years.
You've touched on some important themes there around, you know, how you avoid that reality, which some people would look at and go, wow, lucky you. But actually the day-to-day, month-to-month, year-to-year of that is could be quite isolating. So surrounding yourself with people who understand that, can support that. And then of course you're not going to win every race. Not everything's going to go to plan. So how you continue to stay motivated, you know, through those highs and lows, you know, is something I'm absolutely fascinated by. So maybe you can touch on that in the next answer. But also outside of family, what does a professional network look like for you? Who sits around the success that you have, the sort of the power of the right people in terms of, you know, whether it's the media, the logistics of this sort of you know, global project, or whether it's actually that the high performance team around you. Can you give me a sense of what sits around your, because it is a business, what sits around that high performance team?
Yeah, so to be honest, I am very, very unique in that sense, because I don't have a big high performance team around me. I'm never someone who's had a nutritionist or a psychologist or a biomechanist, or we are really in-house with my family, and that's just the way it's always been for or certainly for the last 5 or 6 years. I suppose as you get to like the latter part of your career, you know yourself, yeah, what you need to do in order to be successful. But for me, it's having the right people around me, and that's always been, I think, the people I trust the most, which is of course my family. So although I don't have this huge team around me, I have a very, very small trusted team, and I think we're a very like mighty team. You know, we're very, very close. Ultimately, my mum has been my coach from the very, very start. She's taken a bit more now of like an advisory role almost, because again, it's very different. Like when you're 12, 13, 14, you know, my mum would set the schedule and I would be so strict on it. You know, I'd follow absolutely everything she said to the T. But as you get older, particularly now, I mean, my mum works full time. She works over in Doha, Qatar. So again, just logistically, I see her maybe a couple of times a year. So it made more sense now for my partner, Michael, to overtake the planning and the programming. So Michael now is really setting my day-to-day coaching. And my mum, although we still follow pretty much all of her training sessions, it's maybe just done in a slightly different order. We tweak things, we adapt things, because he's the one day to day having to make those decisions as to how I feel or what the weather's like. Or so it is a very, very small team that we have, but it's just always been, I suppose it's just worked. It's worked really well for me. I think because we are away so many months of the year, I wouldn't have the finances to be able to have a big team around me. I'm not even supported by my federation. So for me, it is essentially us making a lot of those decisions. But without Michael, without my mum, without even my dad being a support on the side as well, I wouldn't be where I am today. This is actually the first training camp that I've managed, been in a good financial position to bring a physio with me. So this is the first time ever in my career at the age of 35 that I've been able to actually bring a physiotherapist out for just 3 weeks on camp. And even that has made a big step forward just in my performance, my recovery. Like I feel much more confident having someone here to do that. But it's I think it's difficult in elite sport, trying to find that balance of getting the right people, because that really make all the difference. There's no point in having this big high performance team around you if it's not the right people. You know, it really needs to be people that you trust, you believe in, and also just have that support, that happy face at the end of a tough day. Because as you said, there are going to be days where there is a bad performance, and even more so it's more intense for me because I am committing these 11 months away from family and friends. You know, I've missed pretty much every birthday of every family member I can ever think of. You know, it was my granny celebrated like an 80th and all the family are there, and yet I'm away because I had a race that whatever it was that weekend. It's just things in those sort of large moments in life, you miss a lot of them. The only thing that I managed recently to go to was my brother's wedding, because it was in October and I didn't happen to have any competitions around then. I'd already finished, obviously London Marathon was the main one for me in April, and I had a few other races, but it managed to fit in. And I thought my brother would disown me if I don't make his wedding. But that is really the only family event I've managed to make in like the last so many years. So then when you do have a bad performance, you think, oh, do you know, is it worth it? You know, you get into that little bit of a negative mindset of, was it worth missing all these days, or was it worth missing family occasions or friends' birthdays or friends having kids and family and you're not part of it? But I think having the right people around you, like obviously my mom, but also Michael, is a huge, huge support system for me. I think having him with me and him being like, no, it's okay. Like we have the rest of our lives to live with our family and friends. Like this is only a short period in time. I know it feels like a long time right now, but it's a very, very short time in a vast amount of years of the rest of your life that you have with your family and friends. So I think it always helps having someone there who can reassure you and just also be that positivity, you know, bring you up on some of the tougher days, because there's always going to be tougher days.
Yeah. Well, what I recognize in everything that you're saying, and I see it with so many entrepreneurs as well, is that healthy dose of obsession. You've got to try and find balance as best you can, and you do talk about balance, but ultimately you've got to have that fire in the belly. And something I said right back at the start of this conversation is, you know, being valued for who you are, not just for what you do. And you could have any number of physios, you could have any number of coaches, but the people you choose to have around you ultimately defines the culture. And that doesn't mean that you have to be, you know, super positive all the time, but you've got that performance mindset. You know, what I do today matters, and you know, the people around me have got my back. You mentioned LA there. You mentioned the next sort of the next big sort of Olympic cycle, and you've alluded to the fact that you do think about things differently than you did when you were a 21-year-old. I don't know. Can you give us any specifics around, you know, the training and the mindset, not just to be able to sort of refocus on the next big goals, whether it's the world champs or the Commonwealths or the Olympics, but really sort of how do you just chunk things up? Are you just somebody who's focusing on that sort of sprint mindset? It's the next season, it's the next 4 years, and whatever happens beyond that happens beyond that. But I wonder if you could help us, because we all have different focuses in our lives, and people like to think that life is sort of wonderfully linear. You just work hard and things happen. Well, guess what? There's some big right turns and left turns. There's some dead ends. The things change. So you're allowed to sort of think differently in different chapters of your career. And I'm fascinated as to what's motivating you now. You alluded to this idea of, look, let's use the time that I've got, let's make the most out of this. But what motivates you in the specifics of what you're doing on a day-to-day basis? It sounds like they're quite different than, say, 10 years ago.
Yeah, I suppose in a way this is like a new chapter of my career. Like, I've been on the track I started athletics when I was like 11 or 12 at Dundee Hawkle Harriers, and so I've always been on track from then. It was always, and I've moved up the distances, so I think that's probably helped too. Like, when I started at the club as a youngster, I was doing javelin and high jump and sprint hurdles, and it was just really fun. I think my first ever medal at Scottish level was in the javelin, and I obviously don't really have the physique or build as a javelin thrower, but it was just, from a young age, it was always just fun for me. So that chapter was certainly purely just enjoyment of trying loads of different events and having friends at the club. Then obviously I took it a bit more seriously and got into 800 meters and 1500 meter running. Then over the years that evolved into 5K running. Then I went from 5K to 10K, and I remember telling my mum from a young age, I'll never run a 5K. Like, it's way too long. Don't enjoy it. Like, it's just not for me. And then before I know it, there I am at Commonwealth Games, winning a 10,000 meter gold, breaking the Commonwealth Games record. Like, it just all has gradually evolved. Within a couple of years, I've moved up to another distance, so it's felt like a new challenge. It's always been like a fresh challenge and something different, like from a mindset point of view. And then now I feel like similar again. Like, I feel totally refreshed, in that the marathon for me is a completely new chapter. It's so different from the track. It's just so different. It's hard to explain, even with regards to the mentality of running 26 miles, just the long grind of it. The training is just very different. The fueling side of things, I've never had to worry about taking a gel or a drink on a track race, because I'm only out there for like 15 minutes, 30 minutes at a max. So it's just a very, very different, it feels like a different sport that I'm coming into, which is really exciting. And I think it's just given me like a fresh set of eyes, a new, like, refreshed mindset on what I can achieve as well. I felt like on the track you start to sort of maybe hit a little bit of a ceiling. For me, Commonwealth Games really was a huge moment, having all my family there, my friends, my mum and dad, Michael in the crowd, like winning it in the UK with like a British crowd in the stands. Like, it was just a really big moment for me. And even time wise, I felt like I broke all the British records on track: 5K, 10K, 5K, 10K on the road. I felt like the next thing was like, what can I do to really, really challenge myself? And it was the marathon. So this chapter has just been, just really focused on not even so much championships now, but now focusing on the major marathon series. London is the only one I've done so far. I'm doing another London now in April, but I'd love to do maybe Berlin or Chicago at some point. And even that's very different. Like, before, I was always very much like, you aim to make the world championships, then you make the Olympics. They're like, there's a major champs every year that you aim for. But with the 6 majors, they're all different points of the year. And so a lot of athletes will skip the world championships. Like, I didn't want to go to the world championships last year because I was focused on the major marathon series. So it is very different. And I do think that sort of it's just given me a bit of oomph going forward to now reset and focus on something completely different. Still, LA obviously is the ultimate goal. Like, there's no getting away. The Olympic Games is obviously the pinnacle. So I would love to make LA, but it would be over the marathon now. The sort of track is definitely something that I've not left behind me, but it's just not my key focus as we move forward within these next 4 years. But I definitely think it's helped to have, as I said, it feels like a new sport that I'm like coming into.
I love that. So, the continuity is clearly the discipline, the training, the experience, mentally and physically. but giving yourself new challenges for each chapter, and it's quite natural to go up through the distances. Your success over in Berlin at the half marathon and breaking the record there and winning the half must give you great confidence stepping up to the full. Although anyone that's run a marathon knows that running a full marathon is at least 3 times harder than running a half marathon. It's twice the distance, but it's 3 times as hard. It's always interesting. I did a daft one last month, Eilish, where I was challenged to go to Chile and do the world's highest marathon. Maybe that's something you can do when you retire. You were talking about high altitude. We ran from the top of the world's highest volcano, 6,893 meters, but we certainly weren't breaking any speed records out there. But we'll get you into the adventure stuff once you're done with LA. I can tell that Sean's glaring at me to keep things on track, but I'm really fascinated with so much of what you said, because it really starts with people you trust, having the right community around you, process. To bring it back to what Entrepreneurial Scotland does. Yes, they're supporting young people in terms of giving them that global mindset and the quiet confidence to think beyond the thing I learned to the things that I actually want to spend my life doing. I think people look at elite athletes and go, I'd love to do what you do. And I often say to people, I think you like the idea of what I do because you've got the certainty of the results. You know what happened. You're reading the highlights. Whereas when you've got the uncertainty of actually living the process to create that, and I've had people join my team who go, I realize now that reading the book is a lot more comfortable than living the process. And that sort of mischief that you've got, and take that as a compliment, and that quiet confidence to keep pushing on despite the successes and to figure out what that next big milestone is something that massively resonates. I don't care whether it's elite sport or entrepreneurship and business. It's very much about stepping out, pushing yourself, having the right people around you. And the exchange, always talks about confidence, capability, connections. These are the things that really matter, because there's lots of good bike riders, there's lots of good runners, there's lots of people who've got bright ideas to start and build businesses. But what normally sets people apart is not necessarily the raw talent in and of itself. You probably know lots of talented runners that, for whatever reason, didn't have the right culture and support around them to fulfill their potential, whatever that means in their world. But I wonder, as we sort of bring things to a close here, are there any sort of habits or hacks or anything which you think would be helpful to the audience here? I mean, most of the audience here are not trying to win any marathons, but we're all endurance athletes, because we're all trying to take on leadership responsibilities and do hard things over long distances. And I think the metaphor for running a marathon, going a long way, pushing yourself is incredibly relatable to people who are trying to be consistent, show up every day, look after themselves so they can build businesses and create value, especially here in Scotland. So I don't know, maybe that's a big question to finish with, but any hints or tips or hacks or anything which you think might be helpful around the habits and the way you think about this?
I'd say maybe just not being afraid of setbacks, because I think a lot of people come into anything they do, and as you said earlier, like they almost think it's going to be this straight line, linear to success, and that is just not the way life works. Whether you're an elite sports person, whether you're setting up a business, like there's always going to be setbacks. So having that in your mind, knowing, not being overly anxious, oh, it's going to happen, but certainly being aware that there will be setbacks in that journey, but that every setback is almost a time to reset and then build up stronger from it. Obviously, coming from a sporting angle, like for me, that's probably the hardest part, is dealing with injuries. As you mentioned there, I had broke a British record at the Berlin half, was the first British woman to win that. And I thought, amazing, I'm going to go to London Marathon, first London, it's going to be incredible. I'm riding high on a really key moment in my career to this point. And then ultimately suffered an injury. And that's now been 3 years ago now. And I'm only now just getting back into this sort of fitness and form after knee surgery, a whole huge setback. But I never stopped believing through that phase. And I think a lot of people find that difficult, especially my age, being in sport as well, to lose almost 3 years, but to still have that resilience of believing that it's possible, that there's still more there. There's still more that I can get out of myself. I think those setbacks ultimately are what make you stronger. So not being afraid of those moments from happening. They're tough at the time, but you'll look back and you'll actually have learned an awful lot from that setback.
Absolutely. I massively resonate with that. Eilish, it's been a fascinating half hour, and I hope everyone who joined the conversation or is watching it in the future, takes strength and ideas from that as well. And as I say, you write really thoughtfully online as well, so I'd encourage people to read up on some of the stuff you're putting out there, because it's amazing, not just for your own career, but for athletes coming behind you and entrepreneurs, because I think the read across are absolutely massive. Well, I'm going to hand back to Sean. I know there's been an opportunity to throw some questions in. I know Sean's very keen to get to the pub, being St Patrick's Day. I'm just back from Dublin, where we were delivering the match ball to the Scotland Ireland game for the My Name's Doddy Foundation. So that was quite a party. But we did have to cycle 700 miles for the. I was going to say for the loss. I assume most people on this call are Scottish, but it was an amazing party all the same. Sean, back to you. Eilish, thank you so much. I absolutely loved that conversation. What a privilege, and I look forward to catching up again soon.
Thanks very much. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, and thank you so much, Eilish, and thank you, Mark, as well, for ably hosting that so much better than I could. It's amazing. It's a real privilege to sit here and to listen to two incredible sporting icons discussing a topic like this. And exactly as you are chatting, there are so many connections between what you talk about and what we talk to people in the exchange about every day. Now, for the folks that are with us, there is about 10 minutes or so of Q&A here, and there is a Q&A function at the top of the bar. So if you have any questions, please do pop them in there. We will also attempt, if you want, I think there's a raise your hand function that should be live. So if you would like, you can raise your hand and we'll unmute you to ask your question in person if you want, or you can pop it into the Q&A side of things. And you can ask a question of Eilish, or you can ask a question of Mark as well. No point in asking any questions of me, because I'll chat to you any time of the day. So, but look, it's phenomenal. There's all the little connections and things you talk about. But the thing that really struck me first, if you don't mind me asking a question at the start, is that you talked about making the choice. And you talked about when you were younger, and you talked about that sort of change, when you got to that camp and you started to look around at some of your soon-to-be peers and the things that they were doing and how they were sort of, it wasn't just training really hard, it was actually a whole lifestyle that you were committing to. And that really resonated with me, because I think that within business and entrepreneurship, I think that's also really important. Like the difference that we see with a lot of people who start businesses and lead businesses isn't necessarily that they are the greatest business leaders in all time, but they make the choice. They make the choice to step into that leadership, and they make the choice to step into that role. So I just wanted to ask actually both of you, in terms of like making that choice, how did you build the confidence to get to that point? Because a lot of people would assume that you just were super talented and therefore it was this natural thing to do. But choosing between talent and mindset, how did you get over the line and say, I'm going to make this choice and I'm going to commit to this fully? What was it that gave you that confidence to do that?
I'd say it obviously didn't happen overnight. It was definitely a gradual build of confidence. But I'd say it probably came from small little bits of success, or things that I viewed as success with myself. Like I could see it, I could see my hard work paying off in races and in competitions. It was only small little breakthroughs, but perhaps, making the Olympic Games for me was obviously a huge breakthrough. So that gave me a real boost of confidence. But then, as you said, going to like a training camp and actually getting the chance to be around people who were professional athletes. These were people who were getting paid to run. I was just there off my own back. I made the Olympic Games with no shoe sponsor, no kit sponsor. That was quite unusual in our sport. So being around these people and seeing, actually, yeah, this is like a full-time job for these people, and this is what I could aspire to be. I think it was having people that I felt were role models, real role models to me, particularly female athletes too, because again, I'd had my mum as a role model, but it's just different. It's very different when you grow up around it like that. At the end of the day, my mum's my mum. So I was very naive to how incredible an athlete she was. It wasn't really until I got much older that I was like, wow, like my mum's a badass. Like she's had me as a kid, then less than a year later has gone on to become a world champion. Like it's just insane the career that she's had. But when you're young, like I think you do look for other role models. Like it's just weird. You don't look at your parents, I don't think. I think for me it was
No.
external. So on this training camp, I had these women that I suppose maybe they were just current. You know, my mum had retired by this point, so she was my mum. Whereas like I watched the Paula Radcliffe, Kelly Holmes, Helen Clitheroe, Joe Pavey. Like I watched all these women on the TV, and now all of a sudden I'm sitting having lunch with them on a training camp or at a competition. And so it does, I think when you are surround yourself with people that are better than you, you do then just naturally elevate yourself. And then you start to build that confidence from just even being around these people in training sessions. I remember doing a training session with Helen Clitheroe and thinking, wow, she's just there, you know, it's not far away. Or with Hannah England, and I think, God, Hannah won a silver at World Championships. Maybe what could I do in 5, 6, 7 years time from now? So I think that confidence is like a really slow builder. It doesn't happen overnight. It certainly takes a long, long time. And right at this moment in time is probably the most confident I feel just within just where I am. I think not even just in sport, but where I am within my life, like the pieces of the puzzle that I've put together outside of my own sport with everything that I do around sport too is something that I've, again, that confidence has just built up over the years. And I do think you get confident as you get older as well. You become your own person and not someone else or someone that you think people want you to be. You know, I think you start to have your own your own confidence just slowly builds up through the years, but it's a long process for sure. But I do think having the mindset change of being around people who elevate you is a big one.
Super. Mark, the same question to you, if you don't mind me asking.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm conscious that we don't want to run out of time, and there's a couple of really good questions in the chat function there. I think it's interesting, that point that you do things for personal reasons. You enjoy what you do as a young athlete, and then other people give you sort of affirmation around it, so it sort of becomes your identity. I was a homeschooled kid until secondary school. Didn't really have I was never in the playground, so my pals were my two sisters. I was riding ponies and going skiing and riding my bike, but I didn't have any validation from a playground. And then I got dropped into Dundee High School, age 12. Found it really tough because I was this homeschooled, sort of socially inept kid, and going on adventures sort of became a really important part of my identity. When I was 12, I left from Discovery Point, Dundee, and cycled to Oban. And at the point that I was getting a tough time at school and struggling to figure out my peer group and stuff, actually doing something positive, going on an adventure, doing something sporty, getting my name in the paper, handing over a charity check to Princess Royal. As a little kid, it just gave me something that was mine. It gave me something that was positive. And and then when I was 15, I did solo Land's End John O'Groats, and you can kind of see how that little kid, I'm now that 43-year-old kid, there's still that child inside that just did something as a young athlete that made me feel good, and I wanted to do more of it. And then when you start to do these things professionally, and I pedaled around the planet at the age of 23, suddenly you're thrown into the public eye, and the world sees you differently than how you see you. And I still feel like I'm just that kid, just grown up a bit, and I love what I do, but I've now got a platform and a responsibility, and I love all of that. But I think at the core, it's still that sort of wonder to push myself, and something that gives me back so much when I put so much into it. The more you work, the luckier you get in sport, and I think it's the same in business.
That's brilliant. So much of that relates, both of what you've said relates to what we talk to people in the exchange about. It's that, you look at the fact that it takes years to build the level of confidence to better your performance. You build that confidence by interacting with other people like you and people that are a few steps ahead of you on the journey, because they give you the inspiration, they give you the insight, they give you that connection and edge to push on. So huge amounts of transferable connections within that. I'm going to jump to you, Helen, because I see you've got your hand up. And I think you can unmute yourself, but if you can't, I can do it from here. But if you'd like to ask your question.
Yep, I can. Just kind of following on from what you've just said there, Sean, I think Eilish spoke a lot about living up to others. And I think when somebody's already done what you're trying to do and has done it brilliantly, how do you keep believing in your own version of it without constantly measuring yourself against theirs?
Yeah, I think obviously from a very young age, certainly at high school level, I remember someone telling me my mom was a world champion. And I was thinking, like, it's my mom. Like, I just had no idea of like what that meant because I was so young, you're so naive to it. But getting older, there was always it was never a pressure from my family, to be fair, because my mum was never someone who had medals up around the house. Like, you would have no clue. Her Olympic medals in a sock drawer, never saw it. I only ever saw it because journalists would say, can you bring the medal out and show Eilish, and here watch your mum run on YouTube or whatever it was. Like, my mum had never made me watch her run, like none of that. So for me, the external pressure always came from, probably media, like journalists and newspapers. And I think from a young age, it was almost like I had to do what my mum did. But I was always very good at like keeping us very separate. I was aware that my mum was this incredible person, but I was someone totally different. And I didn't, just because I was in sport, didn't mean that like we were the same being, just because she did the one thing that I was going to have to do the exact same as her. I think I've always been really rational in my own mind that like we're just two very different people. We're very separate people. Whereas everyone else would just combine us together. And I remember being probably about 12 or 13 and doing a cross country one time, and a mum and dad, I think I was like maybe fifth or sixth, and this mum and dad came up to their kid and was like, oh, you did it, you beat McColgan. And I remember thinking, I didn't win the race, so like why is someone bothered about beating me when I'm like fifth or sixth? I just couldn't understand that mentality of like, oh, you've beat someone, so I almost like putting someone down and like elevating yourself up like that. Like, I've never thought like that. I think for me, I'm in the sport because I enjoy it, and I always strive to be the best version of me. And what other people do around me is irrelevant. It's, you're almost trying to find your own lane and your own passion. Yes, someone's been there and done it before, so you sort of have an idea of what you need to do to get there. But my path is always going to be totally different, and I've always felt that in my mind, that just because my mum did it doesn't mean that I'll be able to do it. Obviously, it's been incredible that the two of us somehow have gone on to win the same title of the Commonwealth Games, like 32 years apart. Like, that is an incredible feat. It's still strange to me that we both have achieved that, but actually we've achieved it in very different ways. The way my mum trained back 20, 30 years ago is very, very different to how I train now. So I think it's just believing in your mind that there's not like one pathway to what you want to try and achieve. It might be that your path looks a little bit different, and just accepting that that's totally okay. There's still no reason why you can't get to where you want to be.
That's brilliant. We always talk about the fact that businesses are like fingerprints, they're all so unique, and you can take inspiration and insight from what other people are doing, but it will always be a slightly different path for you. So that's a fantastic bit of insight. There's a great question in the Q&A here. I'm actually going to read it out because I wouldn't do it justice trying to summarize it. So from Claire Stanley, how do you deal with the isolation that can sometimes come with being an elite runner? And I'm thinking specifically about your London Marathon, where you were just behind the front pack, but so far ahead of everyone else that you essentially ran 24 miles alone. There must be a great deal of mental strength involved in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I never ever believed that my like marathon debut that I'd run solo. I just didn't have that. I didn't go into the race thinking that that would be the case. I suppose I didn't know what to expect in London. A lot of the other marathons around the world are either mixed with men and women, so there's plenty of people around you, or they're quite large elite fields. But in London, it's always incredibly stacked. It's like an Olympic Games times 5, because you've got just the top women in history all turn up. So normally at the Olympics, you'll get a couple, and it'll be split across maybe the track and the Olympics, and then there'll be people aiming for Chicago or Berlin as well. So it's spread a little bit, but London always have the top women competing. So I just obviously was not prepared to go with the top group, but as you said, I was ahead of the rest of the women. So to run from start to finish solo was definitely a grind. I think maybe had it been anywhere else in the world, it would have been different. But London, the atmosphere was incredible. And I'd say the support that I received during the course really, really helped mentally to keep going. I think it helps a little bit that I do train solo. So although my partner's on the bike with me, like I do grind out a lot of my sessions totally on my own. So it was a bit more like I'm in that training mode. Like I'm used to being on my own. I'm used to hurting when things get tough and being in my own thoughts and not being afraid of being in my own mind as well for that length of time. But I would say the crowds were the biggest factor in that, of just putting one foot in front of the other when times got really, really tough, particularly from probably about 20 miles onwards. The crowds and people cheering. I had people cheering my mum's name, people cheering my name, people cheering for go on Dundee Hawkle Harriers, do it for Scotland. Like it was just mental from start to finish. There was people lining the streets the whole way, and the support in that race is just far outweighs any other road race I've ever done like that. So I think external support and was a huge factor in that. But as I said, yeah, because I trained solo too, I felt like it was a training mindset that I've probably practiced over and over and over again.
Brilliant, brilliant. And actually, very, very, very quickly, Mark, I might ask you just to talk about the sort of same thing, because, you know, when you talk about isolation and loneliness, you pretty much lived on that bike when you were breaking that world record, and a lot of that would have been spent in your own head. How did you find that?
How did I find it? How long have you got? No, I know you've got 30 seconds. It's the wonderful thing about sport is it's life at its sort of most raw. You know, I often joke you can lie in marriage, you can lie in business, you can lie in almost anything. And I don't mean lie in terms of completely lie, but you can be a version of yourself. You know, there's the truth, and then there's the story you tell. And you see it in business all the time where people go, "Oh, we're doing this, we're doing that." Well, are you? Are you really? And you know, you can do the same in relationships. You can sort of put on a show. You can't do that in sport. You're either doing it or you're not doing it. There's no spin. There's no version of the truth. There's no sort of faking it. Sport is wonderful because, you know, it's just very clear. There's no story you tell to convince people you're doing it. You're either doing it or you're not doing it, and that's wonderfully raw. So, you know, when I pedaled around the planet the first time, I was on my own, and I had my mum at the kitchen table with a map and phoning up the Pakistani transport police trying to make sure I can get an escort around the Helmand province. The second time, you know, I had a team of 40, and, you know, it cost over £1 million, and I trained for 2.5 years for it, and I was trying to, you know, be the first to get around the planet in less than 80 days. So I can't even compare those things in terms of sort of isolation and team around me. But in both regards, if I fail, everyone fails, and I feel that very deeply. So pedaling around the planet in 78 days, which is the record that stands, that's 1,100 hours in my own head. You know, I'm on the bike at 4 a.m. till 9:30 at night, 5 hours sleep, get back on the bike at 4 o'clock in the morning, repeat every day for 2.5 months. So you've got to be able to live with your own thoughts. You've got to be able to, you know, dream about the future, plan towards what you're trying to do, but also you've got time to really, really, really think deeply about sort of why you're doing what you're doing. And, you know, you've got to accept that you're not always going to be positive. You're not always going to be motivated. You're not always going to be on your A game. You just need to show up. You just need to show up. Every day matters. You know, it's not the easy days when the tailwinds and things are going well. It's showing up when you don't feel like showing up. That's how you break records. And that's the bit which, I don't care how great your family are around you, I don't care how great your team are around you, you've got to do it. Nobody can do it for you.
It chimes with everything that we hear. So we're incredibly lucky within the exchange. We get some of the most successful business leaders, not just in Scotland, but from around the globe, who come and talk to the members. And they are the elite athletes of business, and they say the exact same thing. It's one foot in front of the other. It is showing up. They talk about how it is easy to lead when times are good, but real leaders step to the front when times are tough. And that's when you find out who you really are. That's when, you know, the real professionals and the real the real winners come to the front. Folks, there's a few other questions in the chat, but we won't really get time to them. I do want to give a particular shout out though to James Morris, because he had a great question, but he also unfortunately had his 12-year-old who wanted to skip school today to sit in on the call to hear from you, Eilish. So, but being the great dad that he is, the better dad that I am, he wouldn't let his child do that. Education first. So good man, James. What I want to do now is I want to sincerely thank you guys both. You've absolutely been incredible. You have been such huge inspirations on the national stage, but also in person for us. And we can't thank you enough for giving up your time, both Eilish and Mark, to do this. It makes a big difference to people. For those that are on the call, we have a breakout session coming up. No breaking up. We have a breakout session coming up next, and we're going to put you into breakout rooms where you'll be able to continue this conversation with peer groups. And we want you to experience peer group in action, because it's one thing to talk about this and to talk about leadership in isolation, but actually this is an opportunity for you to meet other people, to build your network and to connect with others. So if you guys hang tight, the magic of Teams and the team behind me will allow that to work and get you guys into your breakout rooms. But the very last word is just a huge thank you to everybody who came on today to join us on the call, and a huge thank you to both Eilish and Mark for your kind words and insight.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thank you. So
enjoy the rest of the day. Thanks very much. Bye.
Thanks, Eilish.
Bye.
Thanks, Mark. Bye.